Welcome to the Accelerating Operational Performance Podcast. I'm Greg Schinkel, President of Unique Training and Development, and your host for this episode. And I'm really excited about our guest today, Steve King. He is the Director of Operations at London Machinery, and he's been there for 17 years, and he has his Master's of Science in Mechanical Engineering and a robust skill set in business operations, project management, manufacturing, continuous improvement, engineering, and lean manufacturing. Steve is a seasoned professional who understands both the theoretical and practical aspects of business. London Machinery provides top quality concrete mixer trucks, leading the industry in solutions and technologies to ensure its mixers' safety, efficiency, and sustainability. Steve is responsible for $120 million in annual production, is also the designer of the current manufacturing facility, which is built on lean manufacturing principles. This showcases his expertise in continuous improvement and lean manufacturing. I can't wait to chat with Steve today and uncover some of his insights into achieving operational excellence. Welcome to the podcast, Steve King.
Happy to be here.
All right. So, Steve, this has been a long time coming. I've always enjoyed our conversations, and knowing that you have such a depth of knowledge in manufacturing and lean, this is going to be awesome. Our audience is going to love this. So the first thing I like to start with is, let's start with something really positive. I believe, by the way, you learn, as you do, you learn from both your positives and your struggles. And so I'm wondering about a win that really stands out in your mind that, and especially if you can articulate kind of why that win was important and how it came about. Can you share that with us?
No problem. So it's probably about 5 years ago, London Machinery started to absorb the manufacture of what's now Revolution concrete mixers, and eventually the two companies joined together. That was both a struggle, as in learning how to make a Revolution mixer. Although you'd think of one concrete mixer brand, another concrete mixer brand, how different can they be? It's not so much that they're different. It's the subtleties in the design, the subtleties in how they're made, how they've been put together. So what I really need to do is, or what we really needed to do was just make sure that we knew how to make the Revolution mixer. And that's taken a little bit of time, understanding the basics of, what is the Revolution mixer? How do the components go together? How is it different than the London Machinery branded mixer? We worked through that. We worked through the initial quality issues, the initial problems, and even today we still find the little foibles, little interesting things of, those decals are a little different. We should move them up a bit. That has been a rewarding experience. It's been a very rewarding, as in it's a project that you see real benefit in. You merge two brands, and both brands are learning from each other. So we've taken ideas from one, put it into the other, and improved both at the whole completely at the same time. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, very good. So one of the things that certainly sounds like a challenging project. I want to actually, just for a moment, I want to go even earlier in your career, because right now I get a sense that you're in that mode where I got this, I understand. I'm not saying that there aren't challenges, but you kind of get into your own where you kind of know that you've got some talents and skills. I want to go to the Steve King before maybe you were as self-confident as you are today. And what I'm wondering is, when did it click for you that you were onto something in your career? Because sometimes early in your career, you're not sure, is this the right thing? Am I really any good? And then you kind of get this experience. Usually it's either a project or an opportunity, and where it kind of clicks for you to go, you know what? I think I'm in the right spot. Do you have something that comes to mind?
Yes. When I first became an engineer, so that's my background, engineering. I was working for Honda Engineering in Alliston, Ontario. And what my concern, or what the project was the launch of one of the Civic models. So I had a small area of the plant that I had to redesign. And what I learned there is it wasn't so much the redesign that was the issue or the problem. It was working with everybody, getting everyone on the same page of how we're going to redesign it, how we're going to launch it, making sure that it wasn't just a design issue, but it was a team building exercise of launching the Civic in this one area. That's where I learned that I'm as much an engineer as I am an organizer of the project, a project manager. And that's when it clicked for me. The technical side, I'm okay, I'm good, but it's the whole package of delivering something that's my forte.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying, and actually, it's starting to become a common theme, even though we're only several episodes into the podcast run. What I've noticed is this epiphany that people go and they realize that it isn't all about the tools and the shiny objects in terms of lean and continuous improvement. It's really the combination of those tools with the people side and the organizational skills to pull it together. So that's cool. So then I have to ask you, of course, the other side of learning. There is an expression that says you're either winning or you're learning. And I wondered if there's one where it maybe didn't turn, or it was a struggle at the time, or it didn't turn out as well as it could, but boy, did you get some good lessons from it. Do you have something like that that comes to mind that you can share?
Things I ever did, and you'd think it's simple. I'm designing just a simple platform for some operators, and it is, at various heights and whatnot. And as a young engineer, I designed this, which I engineer it to a T. I just spine it. I make sure it's the right height, it's ergonomically correct, it fits the processes. I get it installed. It's not that it doesn't work. It doesn't work the way the current operators work. I didn't consult with the people, didn't integrate my ideas with theirs. So as it starts out, oh no, this won't fit nicely on the platform. This won't do it that way. Oh, you have to move the table here. Oh, but if you move the table here, then this is in the way. What I really learned is you don't engineer a design. You launch it with the people. There's a staged process of understanding and making things better.
Right. So I agree with you that that's a valuable lesson. I think it's actually a painful lesson for many people is when you forget to involve the end users, inevitably it works. This actually makes me think of the work that you've done recently when you've had a chance to redesign the manufacturing facility. I know one of the tenets of lean and continuous improvement is a lot of the costs of an operation are kind of baked in at the design stage. And then, after that, you can kind of tinker and make improvements, but it's all incremental. Like a lot of it has to do with like what are the limitations in flow in the facility and so forth. I'm curious when you had the opportunity to relay out or to do a design from scratch, how much, I guess, how much better was that for you in terms of um, being able to do that kind of right the first way? Was that a special treat?
It, Interestingly, when you have constraints in an existing building or existing process, it can help you design it. So when you're a brownfield, you have these constraints. I actually found it at first difficult when I had almost no constraints. But what I learned is I have to give myself my constraints. So that is really where I think I understood what what design really is, if I want to call it that. As I forced myself, okay, how many mixers a year will we make? What type? What models? So I put in my own constraints, and I realized as I was putting those in, that almost designed the manufacturing process for me. So what's happened in my life, I've learned that the way to design is to create a series of constraints with your plan, and then your design comes out almost naturally.
I think there's a book called A Beautiful Constraint or something like that. And it's sort of based on the same thing. It's funny, even in negotiations, they always say, oh, I want unlimited authority. Are you sure you want unlimited authority? It actually happens that you may be better negotiating from somewhat limited authority than unlimited authority. I think the same thing goes there, where unless you put constraints, which really become your design guardrails, that's what helps you figure out what the right design is. Otherwise, you just have too many options until you kind of constrain yourself really with the requirements is what you're constraining yourself with, right? So I think that's kind of cool is that constraints often give you the motivation to find more innovative solutions than when you have no constraints. And you see that in plants where they start with a big footprint and everything is kind of loose, and then as they get busier, it gets more constrained and becomes a problem. I just think starting with that principle of constraints is helpful. Um, because you're skilled in lean manufacturing and continuous improvement, I'm just curious. I mean, you've shared a bit already. Is like, what's your take on? You've got toolkits, you've got people, you've got an overarching system. Where have you seen the greatest amount of success? And the ultimate in lean seems to be total active management, where the supervisor essentially owns the production of their unit and can report on those numbers. And I'm just curious what your take is on helping lean and 5S efforts really get traction and sustainability.
Biggest thing there is understanding the problem you're trying to solve. What I've seen and what I've learned is someone will say, "Oh, I want to do 5S." But what does that mean? That means you want to clean. That means you want to have checklists. That means you want to have whatever. What problem are you trying to solve? Once you almost back to those constraints, what are the constraints? What are the problems you want to solve? How will 5S help you? If it's not helping you, it's not the right tool. What you're really trying to do is decide what are the problems I have and how am I going to solve them? So you can pull the few tools you need from your toolkit, use those, solve those problems, and that's what gets you success. It's not implementing lean, but solving the problems that lean will help with.
That's a good take on it. I wonder, like, have you been able to get to that total? I'm putting you on the spot a little bit. I wondered if you haven't quite gotten there yet. How do you really get to where the supervisor takes ownership of their department and reports to you on how it's performing and what they're doing versus sort of the more traditional where management sort of reviews performance and then, almost directs the changes? Have you seen that kind of total active management so far? And if not, what do you think the stumbling block is?
The PDCA cycle, plan, do, check, adjust, the Shewhart cycle, is what is really needed to help any area run well. You must ensure that there's a plan. There always needs to be an overarching plan from upper management or from a schedule or something like that to the department. But once that's communicated, there's the same constraints we just talked about. You have constraints on manpower, constraints on other things. You set those, you make sure the person understands them, help them understand their own constraints, and then ask. And I do it daily. We do it with a daily board walk where we walk the area as a team. What are the problems? How are you doing on your metrics? We walk those, and as that comes forth, it's really I'll use the word coaching. It's not necessarily coaching. It's understanding the problems as a group, not as a leader, but as a group, and helping each other. With the one person realizing that they're responsible for this area. Also making sure they understand that's their responsibility and that they can ask for help. They can. It's their job to ask for help. It's not going to be forced upon them. Those really giving the constraints and understanding that is the job to run this area. That's what makes them independent.
Right. So I think I agree with you that this idea of the coaching philosophy of essentially noticing things together. I mean, that's the principle of, first of all, the fact that your team goes on the floor, does the Gemba routine, which is to go into the boards, go to where the work is being done, and then facilitate a conversation with the folks who really can drive the results. So that's awesome. I know that we did do some work with your leadership team, but I'm interested in your take on leadership and manufacturing performance. And the reason I say that is because I think a lot of companies view there's soft skills training and then there's operational excellence principles. And I don't know that enough people really look at the blend here. And so I'm wondering what your insights are around how does leadership affect operational performance in sort of not a casual way, but somewhat even in a direct way. Do you have insights into that?
Most important thing there is back to that Shewhart cycle is really setting the plan, making sure that as a group, there is one plan. It's not a series of individual departments. It's not a series of individual groups, but the groups understand the greater goal is to produce this amount with these at this cost with this level of quality. Once that's set and you monitor so that your plan, then there's your do, that's your everyday. Then there's your check. In our case, most of it happens at these boardwalks. There's other checks. And you keep redefining that. And then you get back to the adjust. And that's where you adjust the plan and get back to, hey, we're going to run some overtime. We're going to do this. So the leadership is really ensuring that that cycle continues to run and that people are as engaged as they can be in that cycle.
Yep, that makes total sense to me. Since you mentioned departments, and you kind of mentioned, so one of the things we've noticed in some companies is because each of the departments has its own mandate. I'm almost drawing the silos with my hands here, but because each department has its own mandate and KPIs, but there's, like you said, there's an overarching goal that unites us all. I'm just wondering where you've seen in your career where there can be sometimes either competing priorities or there isn't always alignment, and just what to do about that if it's noticed.
The answer really is sort of obvious. It's going to be get alignment. Once it's noticed, there is I'll call it the poor leadership of letting it continue. And one thing I'd say we preach here where I'm working, is that if you're not aligned, you're going to talk, you're going to discuss, you're going to force some alignment because you just get out of sync. A company produces generally one product, or you can only have a manufacturing plant do one thing at a time. I mean, yes, it can do more, but a product comes out one day one or hour one, then another one, then another one. You can't run with, at least effectively, with a whole bunch of different priorities. You force as a group to get to the one priority and just move forward.
All right. So I'm wondering when you, well, actually, I'm going to ask this question because it's at the top of my mind. And we went through this with some site leader training for another client where we were training plant managers. And the issue is, how much do you either allow, although I don't even like the permission aspect of saying it that way, but how much do you think people at the front line need to understand the value that they bring, or even understand the business and their role in the business? What I'm wondering is, traditionally there's a lot of information in the leadership team, and some of it percolates down to the team, and there's always this school of thought, well, either they don't know how to process the financial information or measurement metrics, or they don't care about it, or they don't know what to do about it. And I'm just wondering, what's your view of how much you can educate a frontline team member in the value that they're creating or the impact of what they're doing?
We run a monthly meeting, our town hall. We share a number of metrics. We get into some financial information. There is a point at which I'll say you're probably boring your audience and they're not sure what to do with it. But what we do, we make sure that people understand how we're performing, why we're making the decisions we are, and ask for input. In fact, as part of this, we include some safety training, and there's always a quiz. How is this safe, isn't it? But we ask for on the back of that quiz, do you have any questions on what we presented? Is there anything you didn't understand? And we're not just talking on the safety aspect, but on everything. How much product we have to produce, why we're hiring more people, why we've shifted production here. Even if people don't fully understand, and no one fully understands when you give a presentation, there's always something someone misses. It's the respect you give the person that, yes, you're part of the team. You're owed this information so that you can make intelligent decisions. You can come back with, oh, why are you doing this? This doesn't make sense to me. Oh, maybe that is a great point the other person's making. Now you've had a chance to have a two-way conversation. If you give people the information about the company, you can have intelligent two-way conversations. Without information, it's just fabricated. It's just fugazi. The military, I think it's in the Marines, they talk about commander's intent. And we try not to just say, do this, do A, B, and C, but why we do it. This is why we're doing it. So when you get to the point of, oh, I didn't talk to that person about that, they understand the intent, they're educated in why we're doing things, and they can make intelligent decisions along the same line. We have our plan, and we don't just say do A, but here's why we're doing A, so that everyone can align themselves.
Yeah, I had a person who had served in the Marines, the U.S. Marine Corps, last week, and he said by having that clarity on the mission intent and having people understand the big picture, why and what we're trying to achieve, if you haven't been specific about some of the details or things shift in the operation, at least people know what they're trying to achieve, and then they're more likely to make better decisions about it. So I like that take on it. Now you've seen your share of supervisors or people who kind of come from the floor to become team leads or supervisors, and some seem to excel at it. Some seem reluctant to embrace their leadership role. I'm just wondering what you've noticed is important for those frontline leaders when they make that decision or when an operator makes a decision to go into leadership. Where have you seen them struggle, and what would be your key message you'd want to deliver to help them be more successful in their leadership role?
Probably your toughest question yet, 'cause it really depends on the person. Some people, they are natural, charismatic people who will get people to follow them. Others, if they've moved to a different area, don't have enough technical skill, but now they've been promoted to leadership, think, hey, whatever I say is the right answer. I think it's really working with the individual, making sure that individual, I'm almost back to that plan, that mission, understands the mission, understands the problems of the area, and works well with those. So not every person fits every mold, but the right leader, if it's more of a technical problem, you want them to have that bent. If it's more of a people problem, or not just people problems, but people issues, you want them to have that bent. You put the right person in the right place and coach on, I'll call it the weaknesses or growth points. That's when you get success.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, and you know from our leadership progression model that we say a lot of leaders start out at buddies, and then they have to kind of accept the fact that they have a role to lead a group of people, and then some will evolve into heroes and coaches. Now, what's interesting is I know enough about you to know you're at least at the hero level, right? Which means that people can come to you and ask you a lot of questions, and you can probably solve a lot of problems. But as you know, when you get to the coach level, which is the top of the pyramid, it means you're supposed to help other people solve their own problems and increase their capability. And I'm wondering, how have you viewed that? Because have you at some points in your career caught yourself in hero mode where you're always solving all the problems and answering the questions? And what did it take for you to flip into coach mode? Or is it still a battle to kind of flip into coach mode, which is to help build other people's capabilities?
Whether you call it a hero or a coach, part of my problem is I like solving problems. So when one's presented to me, like, oh yeah, I can help you with that, or I can do that. And then I realize, oh, I am doing it. And I don't know if I'm really showing the other person what I'm doing. So I think when I start to feel that, I will bring the other person along. This is why I'm doing this. This is how I did it. And if something comes up again, it's more, hey, remember how we solved that last time? Oh, yeah. Oh, why don't you just try that? Or something along those lines. I will too quickly, out of just wanting to be helpful, try to solve the problem. And many times I go the wrong way too, because I don't have all the information. So what I most try to do is let's understand the problem together to see if I can give you some insight. If I know the person probably doesn't have a lot of experience here, I will walk through that first idea. Here, let me show you what I would do. Here's what I would do. If I think the person does know, hey, we define the problem together, and then why don't you other person try to execute and come back to me if there are some issues.
So yeah, Ken Blanchard, who probably most people would recognize for having written the books on the 1 Minute Manager, he also has this concept about situational leadership. And it's really about the task proficiency of the individual. Not so much how long they've been on the job, because I think we make the mistake if someone's worked at a place for 20 years, they know how to solve everything. But if you put in a new ERP system or a new approach or technique, you almost have to go back to being more directive And then as the person becomes more proficient and confident, you kind of back off and you let them make the decisions. And that's kind of what you were talking about there. If you were going to give advice, not so much to a new production supervisor, but someone who's an engineer who is following a bit of the path that you did, what advice would you give someone newer in their career that you think would help them achieve greater success overall? Not necessarily faster promotion, but just greater success overall.
This one I do know, and it's understand the problem. Quick story from when I really first started out. They being my company was having a problem. There were these filters, and every night, and these were $500 filters. They were being changed. They were supposed to last about 2 months, but every night a cleaning company or a maintenance company came in and they changed these filters. So the person responsible for that group came to the engineering group and said, "There's something wrong. There's something wrong in the design. We're wasting $500 every night on these filters. You guys, can you figure this out?" So I get assigned to this problem. So I go down there, actually with someone, but the two of us go down there, and we're looking at it, and okay, yeah, this filter doesn't look plugged. Look at the gauge, yeah, it says it's plugged. What's going on? So we immediately start diving into the technical side. I step back and I look at the gauge, I look at the label on it, and then I start tracing the wiring, and it's going to the filters that are beside it, and I look at those filters, and wow, those are really, really plugged. I look at the ones we've got and go, those really aren't plugged. Look at oh yeah, what's happened is the gauges are labeled wrong, and we keep throwing out good filters. So, whereas my partner is going through all the technical specs, my motto here is really look at the problem. Understand what is the problem. It's not that the design is wrong. Dig into it, spec it, get those constraints, understand as specifically as you can what you're trying to do, and then go do it. The more general, the more abstract the question is, the more room for interpretation, the more room for error, the more room for the end user, the customer, the employee, the manager to just not like it or get the wrong thing. Once you've defined that problem, the answers become obvious, which in this case was literally switch a label, and it took me about 10 seconds. I reached up, switched it, explained it to the people who were doing it. Yeah, you've been changing the wrong filters, and we probably wasted $100,000 throwing out good filters. So, simple things can be big problems.
I just, first of all, thanks for that specific story, and it just shows you how some of the simplest things, cost a lot of money, and also don't require that complex a situation. So love that. I'm going to give you a chance to basically, what else would you like to share with people, especially around, how to make improvements go a little either faster or smoother, even though I think this whole episode has been full of that kind of advice. Anything else that you'd share with people about kind of achieving greater performance and results?
I would simply emphasize plan, do, check, act as a model of behavior. Make a plan along the lines of defining the problem, define it as well as you can. Once you have that plan, go execute. Don't be afraid to execute. You don't have to have the perfect plan, define it as well as you can, and then go execute. Check that it is good. The results, did you achieve what you did, or your KPIs what you expect, and then adjust on the next round. The most important thing with that, though, is not just to do it once, but to do it continuously and do it as fast as you can. You don't want large spikes. You don't want to wait 3 months before you can evaluate something that you can look at the next day. Just go as fast as you can, keep checking, and you'll very quickly improve.
So PDCA, it's just such a basic tool, and I think sometimes we overcomplicate things, but just remembering that PDCA cycle is important. I loved how you described that succinctly, so I appreciate that. Steve, you've given us a wealth of information in the podcast. I think we've actually probably hit on all our major objectives. Make projects go faster and better, get better engagement with your people, and also, help people with their career success. So I appreciate that, and thank you so much for being a guest. Just so that people know how to reach Steve, of course, he's at London Machinery, and the Sorry, I just want to get that link. It's lmi.ca. lmi.ca is London Machinery's website if you're in the market for some cement mixers. And of course, you could always find Steve also on LinkedIn. Again, Steve, thank you for being a guest on the Accelerating Operational Performance podcast. First of all, again, this is the kind of value that we hope to bring you every episode on our podcast. And remember that if you want some information about how to develop the frontline leaders in your organization or even the senior leaders in your organization, you can start a conversation with us at our website at uniquedevelopment.com. And other than that, we will hope to see you on a future episode of the Accelerating Operational Performance podcast. Take care.